Hoi, my name is Sana, and today I'm going to try and convince you to read the arc of a Scythe series. The moment I started recording, I felt the pressure. A few years ago, I made a video talking about how it had been such a long time since I finished a trilogy, since the original YA trilogy era, but I've been doing a lot of reading since, and I have a few series that I would love to talk to you about. I feel like my end of year wrap up videos where I talk about my favorite books, there isn't quite enough time to fully sell you on a series. It can be a bit of a hard sell sometimes because it is a big time investment. So in this new video series, I am going to talk to you about different trilogies or maybe even longer series and talk about the things that I love about them, that I think make them unique, and also just give you a little bit more information so you can decide for yourself whether you want to dive into them. So for the first episode, we're doing Arc of a Scythe. You've probably heard people talk about this on YouTube, on Instagram. You might even own the first in the series or maybe even the full trilogy. I got my first copy of the book from the publisher when it came out in 2016, but I didn't end up reading it until 2020. I think for the longest time I just didn't really have a clear picture of what this world was. And even though this cover is, I think, absolutely beautiful and the illustration was done by Kevin Tong, I couldn't quite place this, whether this was dystopian or had a historical twist to it. And so I think when I found out a little bit more about it, that's when I started reading it. It ended up in my top 10 books of 2020, and in the next year I read the second and third book, Thunderhead and the Toll. They also made it onto my favorite books of the year list, and since then I have in person convinced 2 people to read the full series. One of whom is my brother, which is quite funny because I used to push books onto him when we were younger, but it had been a really long time since he had picked up a full series. And then there is a brand new short story collection called Gleanings, and because this has just been released, I got the chance to interview Neal Shusterman and basically have the opportunity to ask him some questions that I think would fit perfectly in this video. Surprise! I have special guest Neal Shusterman here today. He might be a little biased when it comes to the series, but I thought it'd be a very fun opportunity for us to film together and ask him some questions as well.
Happy to answer. One of the Scythe commandments is thou shalt glean without any bias.
So before I give you the series pitch, I first wanted to ask Neal Shusterman about what inspired the series in the first place. How did you get the idea for the series initially?
Initially, the idea for Scythe came about after seeing 10 years of dystopia. I mean, teen dystopia was the biggest thing. I had already written a dystopian series called Unwind. There were 5 books in that series, and the last thing I wanted to do was to write another dystopian story. So I thought, well, how can I take dystopia and sort of flip it upside down? I thought, well, maybe a utopian story. But then utopia doesn't exist. I mean, there's no such thing. So I kind of called that an anti-dystopia story. A story that is not about the world gone wrong, but about the consequences of what happens when the world goes right. When we achieve all the things we legitimately want to achieve as a society, what happens? And how do we deal with those consequences? One of the consequences was immortality. The more research I did, the more I realized we were moving towards that. And so when we're immortal, what happens to the world? There's overpopulation. People will still have to die. If nature is no longer taking care of that, we're left doing it. So I thought, well, what is the least dystopian way of us taking over death? And I thought of all these different things. Computers make the decision as to who lives or who dies. No, that's too dystopian. The government decides. No, that's even worse. So I thought, well, in a perfect world, the Jedi would decide. The Jedi of Death. What would the Jedi of Death be like? And that evolved into the concept of Scythe.
So we've got this world where there are scythes who are the people who decide who dies. Each scythe has a method for who they kill and how they kill, but they can't glean with bias. They have to stick to these certain commandments. They almost feel like judges. They wear these long robes as well. They can't have property. People obviously are walking on eggshells every time they encounter them. And because they can't have property, they basically get given things for free. So they'd walk into a shop, people would see that they're a scythe. They'd go, oh, of course, you can take these No worries, no cost for you. They also change their name when they become a Scythe. They take the name of a historical person that they admire. And in the first place, the story is about Citra and Rowan, who are two young people who basically get selected by the Honorable Scythe Faraday to become his apprentices. Also, to become a Scythe, you kind of have to be a person who doesn't really want to be a Scythe, for obvious reasons. And these two going through their training is how we get introduced to the world of the Scythes. The story takes you to so many places. You get to learn about the history, the society, like the whole side of the world that like normal people don't get to see. There is corruption, there are all these different subgroups in society, and you basically get taken on this massive adventure that goes so far beyond, I think, anything I imagined when I first started reading the books. But I think the best way to talk about a series is just to pull out some of the things that really defines it, like what makes it special, what are the things that you should know about. So what is the favorite thing about the series for like most readers who love these books? I'm gonna let Neal Shusterman take this question.
A lot of people have really said that the world building is their favorite part of my writing. The worlds feel complete, which is what I'm trying to do.
It's such a vast world, there's so much to it, but I think because of how the series is built up, you spend a lot of that first book slowly being introduced to it, and then it really kicks off, I think, in book 2. This book series has its own fandom wiki, which is so extensive, and I think that really says something about a series when fans love it so much and want to know so much about the world and have questions about it that they build a whole fan wiki. Then the other thing that I always talk about when I mention this series is the plot twists. I don't think I've ever read any other series where the plot twists are so unpredictable, like totally take me off guard. There's just some jaw-dropping moments, but what I love about it as well is that they all make sense. When they happen, you go, oh yes, okay, I can see why it's taken this turn. But as I was reading, I just didn't know where it was going next, and I couldn't have predicted those plot twists, and that is one of the things I absolutely love about it. How do you go about creating your plot twists?
Plot twists always surprise me. I don't think they wouldn't be twists if they didn't, because it would have been predictable. But sometimes the characters come up with things that I was not expecting. And that's very exciting when your characters really come to life and start taking the story in directions that you didn't plan. I mean, initially, I start with an entire outline, but I don't stick to that outline because the characters always veer away from it. And I don't want to force them to stick with something, because then they won't feel like real characters anymore. They won't feel like real people. So when the characters come up with things, I always jump on it and then rearrange the story, rework the story based on the decisions that the characters are making. A good example of that is in the first book, between Citra and Rowan, when they are presented to the Scythes at Conclave as apprentices. I was sort of building the story up to that moment, and then once I was there, I realized I didn't quite know what was going to come next and where it was going to go from there. Then I sort of put myself in the mind of Scythe Goddard, who's kind of the bad guy, and I realized he would throw a monkey wrench into this. He would try to figure out the best way to mess it up, and he's smart, so he is going to really figure out a good way to do it. And I realized, what if he puts them in mortal competition with one another? And suddenly that just transformed the entire story, and that wasn't something that I initially planned. It was something that Goddard came up with to mess with the characters. And the story just took off from there.
Now, the titular thunderhead of book 2 is what you could call a benevolent AI, artificial intelligence. It was created in the year 2042. They took all the information from the internet and the cloud and then added an AI onto it. It cannot interfere with the world of the Scythes. And in the second book, you kind of get these little moments, these little monologues in between chapters from the thunderhead directly. And this is how the second book opens. How fortunate am I among the sentient to know my purpose. I serve humankind. I am the child who has become the parent, creation that aspires towards creator. I am by definition pure justice, pure loyalty. This world is a flower I hold in my palm. I would end my own existence rather than crush it.
The reason why I decided to tell a story that included a benevolent AI is because AI is happening. I mean, artificial intelligence is advancing so quickly we don't know what's going to happen with it. And there's a lot of fear about how it could go wrong. I mean, you have stories like The Matrix and Terminator. It always seems that the AI always turns bad because we can't imagine something with that much power not being corrupted. So I set out to sort of create an artificial intelligence that had all of our wisdom and all of our knowledge, but without any of our flaws. And I realized I had never quite seen that before. And really trying to explore this entity that is nothing but benevolent and wants nothing but the best for us. It was almost like we created this artificial God that is struggling to find its place in the universe. And I thought that was poetic and really interesting to explore.
And I think another quite obvious thing about the series that is so great is that it really makes you think. It makes you think about corruption, society, humanity, like what does death mean? What is our view on death? And how would that change if people became immortal? Like if you became a scythe, how would you see death? How would you approach something like that? And all the scythes do approach it very differently. It's all about human nature, and getting in the heads of these different characters I think is fascinating. And then I've got some good news if you are interested in cults and religion, because there is its very own religion in this world that was created in the post-mortal world, and it's called tonism. They loathe the scythes, they don't believe in gleaning, they think it's unnatural, and their symbol is the tuning fork. That might be related to the cover of the third book. Without giving any spoilers, I think fictional religions or cults in books are fascinating. So the moment I realized that that was a part of that world, I absolutely loved it. A lot of trilogies suffer from that second book drop off. You get an amazing introduction in the first book, then in the third book, everything is resolved. There is like a big confrontation, and then the book in the middle, very often characters are kind of, waiting and observing and not much happens. And I think what's really interesting about this series is that for me, in book 2, things get ramped up so much. You discover so many new things, you get taken to new places. The ending of book 2 is quite something. And so I love that it really just carries you through the series in that way. As I was talking to Neal, I was also very curious about what he thinks defines his writing style.
I think my writing style is defined by trying to sort of break the conventions of the genre. I'm always trying to find new ways of doing things, telling new stories that haven't been seen before. I mean, every story's been seen before, but trying to find new interpretations of familiar tropes, trying to take them and sort of flip them so we can see it in a different way. And always sort of keeping readers on their toes.
So for these videos, I also want to include a little section that is the, this series might not be for you if, because I think, not every series is for everyone, and that is part of the decision-making process. So I think, as Neal said himself, if you don't enjoy the thinking about society and thinking about humanity and things like that, and you just want an adventure, then this might not be for you. A lot of what I got out of this series is that aspect of it. There is a lot of adventure. It is very fast-paced. There are lots of plot twists. But if you don't enjoy that sort of observational or active reading, then this might not be the right series for you. And then quite an obvious one, if you're not super into dystopian or utopian worlds. Also, I think if you're looking for a heavy romance plot, there are a lot of YA dystopian series where that is a huge part of the series and takes up a lot of the plot. There is perhaps a little bit of romance in here, but if that is one of the main things you're looking for, then you will not get that in this series. And then the series might also not be for you if you don't think you will read them quite close together. I don't think you have to read them all back to back, especially between 1 and 2. It's really easy to pick it up again. But I would suggest reading book 2 and 3 quite close together, as there is a lot that happens, and if you don't read book 3 that soon to book 2, you might need to do some catching up on the plot again. There are actually extremely detailed summaries on the Scythe fandom wiki, which was very helpful for me as well. So you can go back and read that, and then you're totally up to date, but I would suggest reading those a little bit closer together if you can. I do want to give a little shout out to Gleanings as well, especially because it's just come out. So if you have read this series already and we're just watching this out of curiosity, go on to this one. I wouldn't suggest reading this first. I think you get the most out of it if you've read the series. Immediately took me back to like all my favorite bits. So it was really fun to read this as I was like prepping this video. And I wanted to include a final word from Neal as well, where he talks a little bit about gleanings.
When I did the Unwind dystology, I finished it off with a collection of short stories within the Unwind world because I just wasn't ready to leave that world yet. I decided to do the same thing with the world of Scythe. So I did Gleanings, which is 13 stories that are in the world of Scythe. They answer a lot of questions that fans had. For instance, fans asked, do pets get to live forever in the world of Scythe? Well, I didn't answer that in the series, but I was able to write a story that deals with pets. Also to explore origin stories of some of the characters that you love and love to hate, like Scythe Goddard. You know, what was he like when he was a creepy 16-year-old? And Scythe Curie, who was she when she first became a Scythe? So I had a lot of fun with these stories, and 5 of them are co-written with other authors, which was really great to be able to bring other authors into the world of Scythe. I really enjoyed doing this. I hope you enjoyed hearing about Scythe, and bye-bye.
Huge thanks to Walker Books for working on this video with me. I had this series planned for quite a long time. Then this opportunity to talk to Neal Shusterman came up and I thought this would be the perfect collaboration. Obviously, thanks to Neal for talking to me, and thanks to Books on the Hill for letting us film in their beautiful reading rooms. I think for the next video in this series, I either want to do The Old Kingdom by Garth Nix or The Grishaverse by Leigh Bardugo. Let me know if you have a preference for that. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you end up picking up Scythe after you've watched this and you finish it, please come back and let me know. Having recommended books on the internet for so long, sometimes people will come back like 3, 4, 5 years later and say, oh, I read this book because you recommended it in like 2012. And it never stops bringing me joy. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Doei!